1st. Air Transat Flight 236 accident. Source: ChatGPT. The Air Transat Flight 236 accident refers to a serious aviation accident that occurred between Portugal and Canada on July 24, 2001. This was an accident that occurred in Quebec, Canada, involving Air Transat Flight 236 from Lisbon, Portugal to Toronto, Canada, flight number TS236. This accident is considered a very rare successful emergency landing in aviation history. At the time of the accident, an oil leak occurred in one engine of the aircraft, causing the engine on the other side to also malfunction. The pilots tried to find a suitable airport for an emergency landing, but the danger of running out of fuel and other complicating factors made the emergency landing very difficult. In the end, the pilot successfully made an emergency landing on the runway of Léger Air Base, Canada, without causing any casualties. This accident was considered a very successful forced landing and became one of the classic cases in the aviation industry, receiving widespread attention and research. Source: Wikipedia. Air Transat Flight 236 is an Air Transat flight between Toronto Pearson International Airport in Canada and Lisbon Airport in Portugal. On August 24, 2001, Flight 236, piloted by Captain Robert Pichette and co-pilot Dirk de Jager, ran out of fuel and lost power over the Atlantic Ocean. Later, it successfully glided and landed in the Azores Islands without any traces. One person died and the world record for the longest gliding flight by a commercial aircraft was broken. At 20:52 p.m. Eastern Time on August 23, 2001, Air Transat Flight 236 left Toronto. There were 293 passengers and 13 crew members on board at the time. When it took off, there were 46.9 tons of fuel on board, 4.5 tons more than the legal requirement. The aircraft where the incident occurred is an Airbus A330-243 produced in 1999, with a total of 362 seats on board. 5:36 a.m. UTC, about 4 hours into the flight, fuel began to leak, triggering the cockpit's warning system. First, the aircraft issued low oil temperature and high oil pressure alarms, and then the aircraft issued a fuel imbalance message. At first, the captain and co-pilot thought it was a common computer error in Airbus. In order to deal with the situation, the pilot tried to correct it and opened the switching valves in the fuel tanks on both sides. As a result, the fuel flowed to the engine that was leaking fuel. At 5:41 a.m. UTC, after discovering that the fuel consumption rate was abnormal for a period of time, the crew finally decided to make an emergency landing at Léger Air Base in the Azores according to normal procedures. 6:13 a.m. UTC, 28 minutes after the fuel leak began, the number 2 engine on the right side of the plane stalled after running out of fuel. The captain declared an emergency and decided to fly the number 1 left engine at full speed. At the same time, the captain decided to let the aircraft descend from 39,000 feet to 33,000 feet, which was the appropriate altitude for the aircraft under single-engine operation. 13 minutes later, when the altitude was 345, the number 1 engine also stalled, making Flight 236 a giant glider, 120 kilometers away from Léger Air Force Base. After losing engine power, the aircraft automatically releases the ram air turbine to maintain the most basic operation of the aircraft control system and several indispensable flight instrument displays. However, the aircraft lost the main hydraulic system used to drive flaps, spoilers and alternative braking systems, while the leading edge slats continued to be used. Because the A330 uses a fly-by-wire control system, under such operation, flight operations can only be transmitted to the control surface by analogy without going through the flight control computer, which will more or less affect the control of the aircraft. At the same time, the strength of the braking system will also vary. Much worse than normal. At this time, the captain was in charge of driving the plane, and the co-pilot monitored the plane's descent rate. It was calculated to be about 600 meters per minute, so the plane would make an emergency landing at sea in about 15 to 20 minutes. However, due to forced landing at sea, the consequences may be similar to Ethiopian Airlines Flight 961 that occurred on November 23, 1996, causing aircraft fractures and casualties. Therefore, the captain still tried to find the location of Léger Air Force Base. At 6:39 a.m. UTC, the pilot sighted Léger Air Force Base. At that time, the aircraft was at an altitude of 13,000 feet and only 8 nautical miles away from the airport. After the captain performed a series of turns, deceleration, and altitude reduction, he successfully entering the landing heading of runway 33 and opening the landing gear, they faced a situation where they had to land at an airspeed of 200 knots, 370.40 km per hour, which was much higher than the normal A330 required landing of 120 to 140 knots. Speed. 6:46 a.m. UTC, 20 minutes after both engines stalled, the aircraft landed on runway 33 of Léger Air Force Base at an airspeed of approximately 199.78 knots, 370 km per hour. Multiple fire trucks were already on alert near the runway, Due to the failure of the anti-skid and brake modulation system to function properly, all 8 tires of the main landing gear burst within 450 feet, 140 meters, and the aircraft finally stopped on the runway. A total of 16 passengers and 2 crew members were injured on the plane, most of which were minor injuries. 2 passengers were seriously injured when leaving the cabin, but their lives were not in danger. The investigation pointed out that the incident was caused by oil leakage from the number 2 engine, and the oil leakage was caused by incorrect installation by Air Transat maintenance personnel. Therefore, Air Transat must bear responsibility for the accident and pay a fine of $250,000 to the Canadian government. Although in the investigation report, one of the causes of the accident included the driver's incorrect operation, this was a normal operation adopted in the pilot training. In the end, the plane landed smoothly with only a few injuries and only minor injuries. Partly damaged, the aircraft remained in service after the incident. The pilot received a hero's welcome when he returned home. After the incident, the French Civil Aviation Authority, Direction Générale de l'Aviation Civile, and the US FAA issued new airworthiness directives requiring all Airbus A318-100, Airbus A319-100, Airbus A320-200, Airbus Airlines for the A321-100, Airbus A321-200 and Airbus A320-111 series aircraft have changed their flight manuals and require pilots to confirm whether it is caused by oil leakage before attempting to balance the fuel levels in the fuel tanks on both sides. Switching valves on both sides of the tank. Airbus has also modified its computer system so that it can check whether the fuel level matches the flight plan and issue a warning if fuel consumption is higher than a specified value. The passenger plane involved was repaired and continued to serve with Air Transat in December 2001, nicknamed Azores Glider. It was sealed in March 2020. On October 18, 2021, Air Transat completed the last flight of the aircraft and returned it to the lessor AerCap. 2nd. US Airways Flight 1549 accident. Source: ChatGPT. The accident of US Airways Flight 1549, also known as the Hudson River Drainage Incident, occurred on January 15, 2009. The accident involved an Airbus A320 operated by US Airways, flight number 1549, which took off from LaGuardia Airport in New York and planned to fly to Charlotte Douglas International Airport. Soon after, the aircraft encountered a collision with a flock of Canada geese, causing both engines to fail, meaning it lost all power. Thanks to the calm response of pilot Chesley Sully Sullenberger, the plane made a thrilling emergency landing and successfully landed on the Hudson River in New York City. The emergency landing resulted in no casualties and all 155 passengers and crew were successfully rescued. The accident was widely praised as a heroic crash landing, with pilot Sullenberger and the crew receiving high praise for their calm and professional performance. This incident also attracted the attention of global public opinion and became one of the classic cases in the field of aviation safety, prompting more in-depth research and improvement of pilot training, cabin design, and bird strike risks. Source: Wikipedia. US Airways Flight 1549 was a US Airways flight that took off from LaGuardia Airport in New York City, stopping at Charlotte Douglas International Airport in North Carolina, bound for SeaTac, Washington. Daily scheduled domestic commercial passenger flights from Tacoma International Airport. On January 15, 2009, an Airbus A320-214 responsible for this route was struck by a Canadian Beagle during takeoff and climb. As a result, both engines stalled at the same time. The aircraft completely lost power. The cockpit crew confirmed that it could not reach the destination. After finding any nearby airport, it was decided to make an emergency landing on the Hudson River. The flight made an emergency landing on the Hudson River on the west side of Midtown Manhattan 6 minutes after takeoff. As a result, all 155 people on board survived. The incident is also known as the Miracle on the Hudson. In the afternoon of that day, the Airbus A320 passenger plane numbered N106 US, flown by Captain Sally Berg, took off from LaGuardia Airport in New York at 3:26 p.m. About a minute after takeoff, the captain reported to the airport control tower that both engines on the plane had suffered bird strikes and lost power, and requested to return to the airport immediately. The airport immediately instructed Flight 1549 to turn back immediately, but Captain Salberg found that the distance was too far to turn back to LaGuardia Airport, so he prepared to fly the passenger plane to Teterboro Airport in New Jersey for an emergency landing. Later, the captain discovered that the altitude and descent rate of the aircraft at that time could not allow the passenger plane to land safely at Teterboro Airport. Therefore, the captain decided to avoid densely populated areas and took the risk of making an emergency landing on the Hudson River that runs through New York City. LaGuardia Tower lost contact with the flight 23 seconds after the captain informed him that it was about to land in the Hudson River. The plane flew over the Hudson River and slowly descended in a gliding manner. The tail of the aircraft first touched the water, and then the belly of the aircraft touched the water and taxied. The number 1 engine on the left side of the aircraft fell off and sank to the bottom of the river while taxiing on the water. Finally, the plane stopped taxiing near Manhattan, with its fuselage largely intact. When the fuselage came to a complete stop, it began to sink slowly, and emergency evacuation procedures were immediately launched. At that time, the passengers on the plane kept order and allowed women and children to leave the cabin first. The captain was responsible for directing the evacuation, and carefully checked twice to see if there were still passengers in the cabin, and finally left the aircraft after confirming that all passengers had left. Everyone on board stayed on the wings and emergency inflatable escape slides waiting for rescue. The police and fire brigade were dispatched immediately after the incident. Firefighters arrived by helicopter 5 to 7 minutes after the incident and jumped into the river water, which was only 4 degrees Celsius, to rescue the survivors. The nearby ferry also actively participated in the rescue operation. People threw life jackets into the river and rescued the survivors onto the ferry. The uninjured passengers were taken to a riverside restaurant to settle down. The injured passengers were immediately sent to a nearby hospital for treatment. The initial report of the incident determined that the reason for the loss of power was that the aircraft encountered a flock of Canada brent geese during the climb. The engine may have ingested several of these migratory birds, and the aircraft was unable to withstand the huge impact force and stopped operating. The plane was raised from the water 2 days after the accident to conduct a detailed investigation into more causes of the crash. Final investigation revealed that the engine had indeed ingested several migrating birds. The engines were designed to prevent bird collisions, but the engine eventually failed due to the large size of the Canadian brent geese, causing the accident. After the incident, the captain was generally praised as a hero by the survivors and the American people, especially New York residents, because he remained calm during the plane accident and used superb skills to make an emergency landing on the river. Not only did the fuselage remain largely intact, but also everyone on board survived, and when evacuating passengers, he checked the cabin twice to ensure that no passengers were trapped before the last person left the cabin. After the incident, airports across the United States began trial operation of bird detection radars. If a plane passes by a flock of birds, the tower will notify the flight to avoid the flock. Captain Sullenberger joined U.S. Airways in 1980 and had previous experience flying F-4 fighters in the U.S. Air Force. He has also participated in the U.S. National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, on many occasions to assist in investigating aircraft crashes, and taught at the University of California, Berkeley, studying disaster crisis management. It is generally believed that the captain's rich experience and concept of crisis management are the reasons why he can safely make an emergency landing in the river. The N-106 U.S. airframe was transported to the Carolina Aviation Museum in June 2011 for display. A total of 95 passengers and crew suffered minor injuries, 5 were seriously injured, and 78 people received treatment, mainly for minor injuries and hypothermia. No pets are allowed on the plane. Each passenger received a letter of apology, $5,000 in compensation for the lost luggage, or $5,000 more if they could prove the loss was more than that amount, and a refund of the price of their ticket. In May 2009, they received an offer of all recovered items and $10,000 each in exchange for agreeing not to sue U.S. Airways. Many passengers and rescue workers later developed PTSD, such as insomnia, flashbacks, and panic attacks, and some started online support groups. The hardest and most painful part of the whole incident was when it was over, said the controller responsible for the flight. In mid-2009, in order to prevent similar accidents from happening, the New York government captured and destroyed 1,235 Canada geese at 17 locations in the city, and coated 1,739 goose eggs with oil to suffocate the embryos in the eggs. As of 2017, a total of 70,000 birds have been eradicated in New York City. 3rd. Air Canada Flight 143 accident. Source: ChatGPT. The Air Canada Flight 143 accident, also known as Air Canada Flight 143 or Canada airplane crash, occurred on July 23, 1983. The accident involved an Air Canada Boeing 767 flight from Montreal to Edmonton that suffered a series of serious malfunctions. The cause of the accident was that the crew mistakenly converted the units incorrectly, resulting in an error in the calculation of the fuel volume. The aircraft ran out of fuel in flight, resulting in a total loss of power, commonly known as a fuel mid-air crash. After losing power, the pilot launched a series of thrilling flight maneuvers, trying to find a suitable landing site without power. Eventually, the pilot successfully landed on an abandoned airstrip in Gimli, a small town in Manitoba. Although the plane sustained some damage during the landing, miraculously there were no casualties. The accident became an aviation classic for its thrilling nature and ultimately successful landing, and prompted further improvements in pilot training, fuel management, and safety measures. Source: Wikipedia. Air Canada Flight 143 was an Air Canada flight from Montreal, Quebec to Edmonton, Albi, via Ottawa, Ontario. On July 23, 1983, a Boeing 767 passenger plane that had just been delivered about 4 months ago was flying from Ottawa to Edmonton while cruising at a flight altitude of 41,000 feet, 12,500 meters. The engine ran out of fuel and lost power, and the plane finally made a glide landing at an abandoned Royal Canadian Air Force base in Kimley, Manitoba that had been converted into a racing venue. Gliding record. The 767 became known as the Gimli glider. During the subsequent investigation, the official found that the cause of the accident was due to human error when converting metric units to imperial units, which resulted in the fuel addition amount being incorrectly calculated. After completing the first flight, even though the fuel level was reconfirmed and refueled, and the captain failed to notice, so the aircraft only had half of the available fuel when performing the flight mission. Air Canada was later accused of mismanagement and failure to provide crews with adequate training to familiarize themselves with the operation of the new aircraft. On July 22, 1983, an Air Canada Boeing 767, registration number CGAUN, manufacturing serial number 22520/47, flew from Toronto to Edmonton and underwent a routine inspection there. 1 day later, the aircraft arrived at Montreal Dorval Airport, now known as Pierre Elliott Trudeau International Airport, to carry out Flight 143. The captain of this flight was Robert Bob Pearson, and the first officer was Maurice Quintal. Captain Pearson was a very experienced pilot, with a total of more than 15,000 hours of flying time before the accident. Co-pilot Kenta is also experienced, with 7,000 flying hours. About halfway through the flight after taking off from Ottawa, the plane was cruising at 41,000 feet near Red Lake, Ontario, when an oil pressure alarm went off. Captain Pearson shut it down because both engines were getting enough fuel by gravity alone. But a few minutes later, the aircraft's alarm sounded again, warning of low left-wing oil pressure, and Captain Pearson decided to divert to Winnipeg for an emergency landing. Soon, the onboard alarm showed that the fuel level in the left-wing fuel tank was low, and then the left engine stalled. The captain tried to restart the left engine to no avail, and then the right engine also stopped working. The engine power was lost, and the electronic equipment on board lost power at the same time. All electronic instruments in the cockpit instantly failed. The aircraft now relies on a small ram air turbine released from the bottom to generate electricity to maintain the operation of 3 backup instruments and part of the hydraulic system. Without power, the aircraft was unable to transmit a flight status signal to the Winnipeg Air Traffic Control Center's radar. At this time, the plane was at an altitude of 35,000 feet, still 104 kilometers away from Winnipeg. Before this, no one had ever piloted a commercial airliner that had lost power to glide to a safe landing. The captain declared an emergency to the tower and requested an emergency landing at Winnipeg Airport, which has a long runway and complete rescue facilities. Worse, Captain Kenta calculated that it would be impossible to land in Winnipeg at the rate of descent at that time. On this occasion, Captain Kenta, a former Royal Canadian Air Force pilot, remembered that there was a Royal Air Force base near Kimley, so he asked the tower for relevant information, and the tower gave the crew the general direction of the air base. Fortunately, the weather was good that day and the crew was able to make a visual approach. The captain finally found the location of the military airport after searching, but because he was worried that the landing speed would be too fast, he had to use his glider experience to control the aircraft to glide to a lower speed and make an emergency landing on runway 32L of the airport. However, when the landing gear was released, the main landing gear was lowered and locked by its own gravity, while the nose landing gear failed to lock due to the failure of the hydraulic system and the inability to lower by its own gravity. The Air Force Base has long been demolished and converted into Kimley Motorsport Park, and the original track has been converted into a speedway track for straight-line racing. At the last moment, 2 tires of the main landing gear blew out when the plane made a heavy landing, and the nose part of the plane directly touched the ground and slid. The plane finally stopped after taxiing for a certain distance on the track. During an inspection on July 22, a malfunction was discovered in the aircraft's LCD fuel display. At that time, technicians discovered that simply pulling out a circuit breaker on the Fuel Quantity Indicator System, FQIS, could cause the display to display the fuel inventory again, but the aircraft still used the fuel gauge rods on the bottom of the wings to make a second determination of fuel inventory. On the morning of July 23, this passenger plane with registration number CGAUN arrived in Montreal. The maintenance personnel in Montreal found that the fuel display did not display anything. After checking the flight records, they found that pulling the circuit breaker to make the display redisplay the fuel inventory was different from the correct method, so the maintenance personnel decided to replace the fuel display for this 767, however, because the aircraft was one of the first batch, 4, of Air Canada's 767 aircraft at the time, Montreal did not have many 767 parts. Just as the maintenance staff was about to use the previous method to temporarily return the aircraft to flight timing, the dispatcher's appearance interrupted his work and he forgot to pull out the circuit breaker. Subsequently, the pilot returned to the cockpit. Although the pilot had been informed in advance that there was a problem with the display, the crew learned after entering the aircraft that the display had no display at all and could not continue to operate like the previous flight. After checking the minimum equipment list, the captain learned that the 767 aircraft could not take off without a fuel display. However, the captain believed that it would be sufficient to calculate the fuel manually and then measure the fuel volume with a fuel measuring rod. Make the aircraft fly safely. The pilot decided to replenish fuel and continue the flight to Edmonton. Traditionally, civil aviation aircraft calculate the weight of fuel in imperial units. The takeoff and landing of an aircraft is very sensitive to load, so weight rather than volume is used to calculate fuel. This batch of Boeing 767-233 passenger aircraft that have just been put into service uses metric units. Before refueling, the pilot calculated that 22,300 kilograms of fuel were needed to fly to Edmonton. When measuring with a dipstick, he learned that there were 7,682 liters of fuel left in the tank. The dipstick used by the ground crew could only the volume of the remaining fuel in the fuel tank was measured to be 7,682 liters. The volume and weight need to be converted again. The ground crew made an error when converting the metric volume liters into the imperial weight pounds. 1 liter equals 1.77 pounds. As a result, 20,088 liters of fuel should have been added, but only 4,916 liters were added by mistake. That is, the 767 aircraft was actually only loaded with 22,300 pounds equals 12,598 liters equals 10,078 kilograms of fuel, which was less than half of the required amount of fuel. In the past, the calculation of fuel replenishment has always been the responsibility of flight engineers, but the Boeing 767 was one of the few new aircraft models at that time to use a two-person pilot group. The pilots had to personally take charge of this work project with which they were unfamiliar. When the ground crew brought the refueling records to Captain Pearson for verification, he checked the relevant calculation data, but still misused the same conversion factor without realizing it. The crew entered the erroneous information into the plane's flight management computer and departed for Edmonton. The ground crew added less than 3/4 of the originally required fuel. No one on duty, from the captain and co-pilot on the plane to the ground crew team, was aware of such a huge gap. Abnormal. Flight 143 broke the world record for the longest gliding flight by a commercial aircraft at the time before making a safe emergency landing. The flight ran out of fuel about 50 kilometers away from Kimley, and the plane glided for a total of 17 minutes. This record was surpassed by the Canadian Air Transat Flight 236 accident in 2001. The accident aircraft underwent preliminary repairs at Kimley and then flew to Winnipeg for comprehensive repairs and resumed service with Air Canada. After the accident, the aircraft received the new nickname Gimli Glider and remained in service until January 24, 2008, 25 years before it was decommissioned. After retirement, he flew to Mojave Airport in the Mojave Desert in California, USA. The sealed flight mission was assigned to the crew who made the emergency landing of Flight 143 at Kimley, and arrangements were made for Air Canada employees to say goodbye to the aircraft at the airport before takeoff. In September 2017, the aircraft was dismantled at Mojave Airport. Some of the skins are sold as souvenirs by some companies. The engineering vehicle that Air Canada arranged to repair the aircraft from Winnipeg to Kimley also ran out of fuel and was unable to move forward, so it was necessary to call for assistance. In 2001, it was the Canadian Air Transat Flight 236 accident that broke the gliding distance record of Flight 143. They also ended up making an emergency landing at the Air Force Base. Relevant units later used flight simulators to test whether other crew members could successfully make an emergency landing when encountering the same situation, but they all obtained test results that the plane crashed and no one survived. The captain is a glider enthusiast and has rich experience in flying gliders. In this incident, because the landing speed was too fast, when approaching the runway, the captain used the glider to slide sideways to slow down, so that the landing speed was within a safe range. 4th. Air Transat. Source, Wikipedia. Air Transat AT. Inc. is an airline headquartered in Montreal, Quebec, Canada, operating scheduled flights and charter flights in 63 regions in 30 countries. The hub airports are Montreal Pierre Elliott Trudeau International Airport, Toronto International Airport and Vancouver International Airport, while the key airports are Calgary International Airport and Quebec Jean-Lesage International Airport. Air Transat was founded by François Legault and Jean-Marie Eustache, Felipe So, Leonard de Caesar, Ion Le Cavalier and Pierre. It was founded by Mina and others, but François Legault later withdrew in 1997 due to differences with his partners. Air Transat was established in December 1986 and made its maiden flight on November 14 of the following year. The flight was from Montreal to Acapulco. Today, the company carries 2.5 million passengers a year. Air Transat, Air Canada Jazz and WestJet are among Canada's largest airlines. Before February 2014, Air Transat once only operated wide-body aircraft, and there were only 9 airlines in the world that only operated wide-body aircraft. On August 23, 2019, Air Canada announced the acquisition of Air Transat's parent company, Air Transat, for $720 million Canadian dollars. On April 2, 2021, after the European Union stated that it would not approve the existing merger plan. Air Canada and Transocean announced the termination of the merger. 5th. Aircraft fuel tank. Source: ChatGPT. Aircraft fuel tanks are components of an aircraft that store fuel, usually located inside the wings or fuselage. Aircraft use fuel tanks to store fuel for combustion in the engines to provide power to support flight. Here is some basic information about aircraft fuel tanks. Location: the fuel tanks are usually located inside the wings of the aircraft. Some aircraft, especially large jets, also have fuel tanks inside the fuselage. Type: tanks can be internal or external. Internal fuel tanks are located inside the wing or fuselage, while external fuel tanks are installed under the wing or outside the fuselage. Materials: fuel tanks are usually made of lightweight and corrosion-resistant materials, such as aluminum alloys or composite materials. These materials provide sufficient strength and durability while maintaining low weight. Capacity: the capacity of a fuel tank depends on the type and design of the aircraft, as well as the requirements of the flight mission. Larger aircraft typically have larger capacity fuel tanks to support long-distance flights. Fuel management system: aircraft fuel tanks are usually equipped with a fuel management system that monitors the amount of fuel in the tank and ensures even distribution and supply of fuel during flight. Safety: fuel tank designs must meet strict safety standards to prevent fuel leaks and fires. Tanks are usually equipped with anti-leak and fire protection systems, as well as drainage systems to deal with emergencies. The design and management of aircraft fuel tanks is crucial to the performance and safety of the aircraft. Aviation engineers will strictly follow relevant regulations and standards when designing and maintaining fuel tanks. Source: Wikipedia. Wing integral fuel tank, English, wet wing, literally translated as wet wing, also known as integral wing fuel tank, integral fuel tank wing, is an aerospace engineering technology in which the wing structure of the aircraft is sealed and used as a fuel tank. These are also called integral fuel tanks. 6th. Airplane engine. Source: ChatGPT. The aircraft engine is the power source of the aircraft and is responsible for providing thrust to drive the aircraft to fly. Engine design and performance will vary depending on the aircraft type and purpose. Here is some basic information about aircraft engines. Type: common aircraft engine types include piston engine, also known as an internal combustion engine, typically used in small aircraft. It works similarly to a car engine. Jet engines, including turbojet engines and turbofan engines, widely used in commercial airliners and large military aircraft. Propeller engine, combines the characteristics of a piston engine and a propeller, and is commonly used in turbojet aircraft and some small aircraft. Working principle: jet engines produce thrust by compressing air, burning it, and then ejecting the high temperature and high pressure gas produced by the combustion. Propeller engines use propeller blades to be pushed by the airflow inside the engine to generate thrust. Structure: aircraft engines usually include components such as compressors, combustion chambers, turbines, and nozzles. Each component has a specific function and is responsible for performing specific tasks at different stages of the engine's operating cycle. Performance: engine performance depends on factors such as thrust output, fuel efficiency, reliability, and adaptability. Aircraft design and selection will vary based on different mission needs and performance requirements. Maintenance: aircraft engines require regular maintenance and overhaul to ensure their normal operation and safety. Airlines and manufacturers often develop strict maintenance plans and procedures to ensure engine reliability and durability. The design and performance of aircraft engines have an important impact on the performance, range, load capacity, and fuel efficiency of the aircraft. Therefore, engine selection and maintenance are a crucial part of aircraft design and operation. Source: Wikipedia. Aircraft engine refers to the engine equipment mainly used to generate pulling force or thrust to move the aircraft forward. In addition to generating forward force, it can also provide power for electrical equipment on the aircraft and provide air source for air conditioning equipment and other air-consuming equipment. Generally, due to the demand for flight, the design is quite light, but it also requires considerable performance and extremely low failure rate, so the process requirements for design and production are relatively high. 7th. Aircraft fuel system. Source: ChatGPT. Aircraft fuel system refers to the system used to store, supply and manage aircraft fuel. It is a key component to ensure that the aircraft can use fuel safely and effectively during flight. Here is some basic information about aircraft fuel systems. Fuel storage: aircraft typically use fuel tanks or tanks to store fuel. These tanks are usually located inside the wings and fuselage, but may sometimes be mounted under the wings or outside the fuselage. Fuel tanks are usually made of lightweight metal alloys or composite materials to ensure sufficient strength and durability. Fuel delivery: the fuel system delivers fuel from the fuel tank to the engine through fuel pumps and pipes. Fuel pumps are usually electrically or mechanically driven and are responsible for maintaining constant fuel flow and pressure. Fuel filtration: the fuel system is usually equipped with a screening program to filter impurities and particles in the fuel to ensure that the fuel is clean and pollution-free to prevent engine damage. Fuel supply. The fuel system ensures that the engine always has an adequate supply of fuel during flight. It typically includes fuel pumps, fuel metering, and fuel control systems to ensure proper supply and management of fuel. Fuel management. Aircraft fuel systems require precise management to ensure fuel consumption and distribution during flight. Pilots can typically monitor fuel levels through instruments and controls and manage fuel according to flight plans and conditions. Fuel add-on systems. Some aircraft may be equipped with additional fuel add-on systems, such as in-flight refueling systems, which allow the aircraft to be refueled in flight to extend its range or flight time. The design and operation of aircraft fuel systems are critical to aircraft safety and performance. Aviation engineers will strictly follow relevant standards and regulations to ensure the reliability, durability, and safety of the fuel system. Source: Beidou Encyclopedia. The function of the aircraft fuel system is to store fuel and ensure that it can continuously supply fuel to the engine according to the pressure and flow required by the engine under any specified conditions, such as various flight altitudes and flight attitudes. In addition, the fuel system can also complete additional functions such as cooling other systems on the aircraft, balancing the aircraft, and keeping the aircraft's center of gravity within the specified range. The requirements put forward for the fuel system are reliable operation, long life, fire safety, lightweight, small outer dimensions, simple structure, convenient maintenance and repair, precise control and good production process. The fuel tank has sufficient capacity to ensure the consumption of the engine during normal operation. As the oil level in the fuel tank drops, the fuel gauge sensor continuously sends signals. The driver can know how much fuel is left in the fuel tank through the fuel gauge in the cockpit. At the same time, the breather pipe introduces outside atmosphere or pressurized air into the fuel tank to fill the space vacated by the drop in the oil level. The booster oil pump supplies oil to the engine to ensure that the engine's fuel pump inlet has sufficient oil pressure. The one-way valve only allows fuel to flow in one direction, which prevents cross-flow of fuel in each tank. When fuel flows in the fuel delivery pipe, the consumption meter sends out a signal, and the driver can know the fuel consumption of each engine through the instrument in the cockpit. Then, the fuel flows through the oil-gas separator to separate the gas brought in during fuel supply or the gas evaporated from the fuel to prevent the gas from entering the engine's oil pump. Aircraft fuel systems are sometimes equipped with oil filters to remove dirt and impurities and ensure clean fuel. 8th. Azores. Source: ChatGPT. The Azores, located in the eastern Atlantic Ocean, is an autonomous region of Portugal and consists of 9 main islands and some smaller islands. The islands are divided into 3 groups: the Eastern Islands, the Central Islands, and the Western Islands, Western Islands. The Azores are located approximately between Portugal and North America, about 1,500 kilometers from the Portuguese mainland. Here are some key facts about the Azores. Geographical features: the Azores are composed of volcanic islands with deep sea canyons scattered between them. The highest peak is Pico Mountain on Pico Island, with an altitude of 2,351 meters. It is the highest peak in Portugal. Climate: the climate of the Azores is a subtropical maritime climate, with warm and humid winters and cool and comfortable summers. Precipitation is distributed evenly and rain occurs throughout the year, so the vegetation on the island is very lush. Economy: the economy of the Azores relies mainly on agriculture, fishing, and tourism. Fisheries are particularly important in the region, including fishing and farming of seafood. Tourism has also gradually developed in recent years, attracting many tourists to enjoy the beautiful natural landscape and participate in various outdoor activities. Culture: the culture of the Azores is influenced by the native Portuguese culture, while also retaining unique local characteristics. There is a rich variety of traditional festivals, folk arts, and cultural activities such as traditional music, dance and handicrafts. The Azores are famous for their magnificent natural scenery, rich marine resources and unique cultural traditions, attracting tourists from all over the world to explore and experience. Source: Wikipedia. Azov, Portuguese, Açores, also known as Assyria, officially known as the Autonomous Region of Azov, Região Autonoma dos Açores, is an archipelago located in the center of the North Atlantic Ocean. It is one of the 2 autonomous regions in Portugal. Its administrative capital is San Miguel. Ponta Delgada on the island. The archipelago consists of 9 main islands, approximately 1,360 kilometers west of mainland Portugal, approximately 1,643 kilometers from Lisbon, approximately 1,925 kilometers from the coast of Africa, and approximately 1,925 kilometers southeast of Newfoundland, Canada. The total area is 2,247 square kilometers. The main industry on the island is tourism, followed by planting, dairy farming, animal husbandry, and fishery. 9th. Bermuda Delta. Source: ChatGPT. The Bermuda Triangle, also commonly referred to as the Bermuda Triangle, is a geographical area located in the Northwest Atlantic Ocean, the boundaries of which are usually defined as an imaginary line running from Miami, Florida to Bermuda to Puerto Rico. This area is famous for its allegedly frequent mysterious disappearances. The Bermuda Triangle's reputation stems from a series of unusual events, including the disappearance of ships and aircraft, and abnormalities in radar and communication systems. However, there is no consensus on the explanation for these events, and several theories exist to try to explain these phenomena. Weather anomalies. Some studies believe that the Bermuda Triangle is at the intersection of multiple climate systems, which may lead to extreme weather phenomena, such as tornadoes or hurricanes, posing threats to aircraft and ships. Earth's magnetic field. Some theories suggest that anomalies in the Earth's magnetic field near the Bermuda Triangle may have caused compasses to malfunction, disorienting ships and aircraft. Gas hydrates. Some scientists have theorized about geological activity and believe that there may be large-scale gas hydrates in the Bermuda Triangle. When these hydrates are suddenly released, they may cause bubbles to accumulate and ships and aircraft to be sucked underwater. Human factors. There are also theories that most so-called mysterious disappearances are due to misunderstandings, fictitious or contradictory reports, or due to deficiencies in navigation and communications technology. Although the mysterious legend of the Bermuda Triangle is fascinating, many scientists believe that most of its events can be explained by conventional scientific principles and natural phenomena, without necessarily resorting to supernatural or mystical explanations. Source: Wikipedia. The Bermuda Triangle, English, Bermuda Triangle, also known as the Devil's Triangle, English, Devil's Triangle, is located in the Sargasso Sea in the North Atlantic Ocean and is formed by the British Bermuda Islands, the American Puerto Rico and the southern tip of Florida, the United States. Triangular Sea Area, covering an area of approximately 1.16 million square kilometers, 450,000 square miles. The vast majority of the Bahamas territory is located in or near the sea. The waters around the Bermuda Triangle are one of the busiest in the world, with ships frequently passing through to reach ports in the Americas, Europe, and the Caribbean. More credible sources do not believe that there is anything mysterious about this area. In addition, a 2013 WWF study listed the 10 most dangerous sea areas in the world, and the Bermuda Triangle is not among them. In other words, the Bermuda Triangle is not a mysterious or dangerous sea area. Legend has it that mysterious disappearances of planes and ships have occurred frequently in the Bermuda Triangle, but research does not support this statement. However, due to various rumors, disappearances in the Bermuda Triangle, and the various mysterious atmospheres that have arisen due to the rumors, it has become a part of popular culture, and disappearances are even thought to be caused by alien creatures, four-dimensional time and space, or supernatural phenomena. The legends related to the Bermuda Triangle are often adapted and cited in various film and television works. 10th. Captain Sully. Source: ChatGPT. Captain Sully usually refers to Chesley Sully Sullenberger, a well-known retired American airline pilot. Sullenberger is best known for his successful emergency landing of U.S. Airways Flight 1549 on January 15, 2009. At that time, Flight 1549 was hit by a flock of Canada geese shortly after takeoff, causing both engines to fail. Faced with this emergency, Sullenberger made quick decisions and landed the plane safely on the Hudson River in New York City, successfully saving the lives of all 155 passengers and crew. This incident is known as crash landing on the Hudson. Due to Sullenberger's calm response and professional skills, he was regarded as a hero and received widespread praise and respect. His experience was later adapted into the movie Sully: Miracle on the Hudson. In addition to his work on the Hudson River incident, Sullenberger has a long career and extensive experience in the aviation community and is a speaker and author dedicated to aviation safety and pilot training. Source: Wikipedia. Chesley Burnett Sully Sullenberger, 3, born January 23, 1951, is a retired United States Air Force captain. Pilot, U.S. Permanent Representative to the International Civil Aviation Organization, CBS News Aviation Safety Guest, Aviation Safety Expert, Aviation Accident Investigator, best-selling author and speaker. On January 15, 2009, he piloted U.S. Airways Flight 1549, which was hit by Canada geese and caused the failure of both engines, and made an emergency landing on the Hudson River in Manhattan, New York. All 155 passengers and crew members on board survived, so he was become a national hero. He entered the U.S. Air Force Academy in 1969 and became a commercial aviation pilot in 1980. He was awarded New York's Key to the City and other honors for his outstanding performance in the Flight 1549 accident. He retired from U.S. Airways on March 3, 2010, after a 30-year career as a commercial pilot. Later he was hired by CBS News as an aviation safety expert. He ranked second among the top 100 heroes and symbols of the times selected by Time magazine in 2009. On June 15, 2021, U.S. President Joe Biden announced the nomination of Schallenberg to serve as the ambassador-level representative of the United States to the International Civil Aviation Organization, ICAO. On December 2, 2021, the U.S. Senate approved Schallenberg's nomination without objection. Schallenberger began working for Pacific Southwest Airlines in 1980. It was merged with U.S. Airways in 1988. Schallenberger continued to work for U.S. Airways until the end of his career in 2010. In total, he has more than 40 years and 20,000 hours of flying experience. In 2007, Schallenberg founded a consulting company called Safety Reliability Methods, Inc. The company provides strategic and technical guidance to encourage other industries to emulate the aviation industry's checklist system, helping clients enhance the safety, performance, and reliability of their organizations. Schallenberger participated in some aviation accident investigations led by the U.S. Air Force or the U.S. National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, such as the crash of Pacific Southwest Airlines Flight 1771 and the crash of U.S. Airways Flight 1493. His investigation into the crash of Flight 1493 is considered to have promoted the advancement of airline procedures and emergency evacuation procedures. He has co-authored a paper with NASA scientists on error control in the aviation industry. He is also an Airline Pilots Association instructor, aviation safety chairman, accident investigator, and a member of the National Technical Committee. His safety work with ICAO and the International Pilots Association, ALPA, was instrumental in a FAA advisory circular. He also contributed to the implementation and development of the Crew Resource Management course. This course is used by U.S. Airways. He taught this lesson to hundreds of crew members. Schallenberger also studied the psychology of how to get the best out of crew members in a crisis. He holds an airline pilot transport certificate for single and twin-engine airplanes, a commercial pilot's license for gliders, and a flight instructor's certificate for single and multi-engine airplanes, gliders, and instrument flying. From May 29 to 31, 2007, Schallenberger was invited to give a symposium on aviation and patient drug safety at the High Reliability Organization's International Conference in Deauville, France. Give a speech on how aviation safety efforts can be transferred to other industries. After 30 years with U.S. Airways and its predecessors, Schallenberger retired on March 3, 2010. The last flight he flew was U.S. Airways Flight 1167, which took off from Fort Lauderdale, Florida to Charlotte, North Carolina. He was piloting the plane with co-pilot Jeff Skiles, who had flown the plane into the Hudson River with him, and there were 6 other passengers on board. Schallenberger said his advocacy for aviation safety and his love of flying will continue. In December 2010, Schallenberg was awarded the rank of Officer of the French National Legion of Honor. At the same time, Schallenberg also continued his speaking career, often discussing topics such as aviation safety, high-performance system improvement, leadership culture, risk, and crisis management at forums held by various educational institutions, businesses, and non-profit organizations. In 2011, he gave speeches at the World Economic Forum in Davos and the Swiss Economic Forum. On November 18, 2011, as part of a fundraising initiative, Schallenberg flew to the Carolinas Air and Space Museum in Charlotte, where the Airbus A320 that performed the miracle on the Hudson was on display. Entering the aircraft for the first time since the accident. After retiring, Schallenberg gave many speeches on topics such as opportunities, challenges, and teamwork, including a speech at the Lions Club International Annual Conference in July 2010, saying that he was just an ordinary person under extraordinary circumstances. And urging political and business leaders to focus on long-term interests at the 2011 World Economic Forum. Schallenberger's memoir Highest Duty, written after the accident, made the New York Times bestseller list and was later translated into Chinese for sale. Schallenberg's second book on leadership, Making a Difference, Stories of Vision and Courage from America's Leaders, was released in May 2012. On sale on the 15th. CBS News hired Schallenberg as an aviation and flight safety expert. Schallenberg expressed his views on aviation accidents including the crash of Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 and Germanwings Flight 9525 on the TV show. 11th. Catastrophe in the Air. Source, ChatGPT. Sky is a documentary series produced by Canada's Cineflix, with the American channel National Geographic Channel, as the main broadcast platform. The series also airs on channels in a number of other countries, such as Channel 5 in the UK and 7 Network in Australia. The Air Catastrophe series is based on a real aviation accident, recreating the entire process of the accident, including the events before the accident, the investigation process, and the various factors leading to the accident. Through in-depth analysis and expert commentary, each episode attempts to uncover the causes behind accidents and draw lessons from them to improve aviation safety. This series is very popular among audiences for its detailed plots, professional explanations and restoration of real events. It not only provides viewers with an in-depth understanding of aviation safety, but also showcases the aviation interface's efforts to investigate and prevent accidents. Source: Wikipedia. Mayday, air crash investigation, air emergency or Mayday, air disaster, English, Mayday, air crash investigation, air emergency or Mayday, air disaster, is a Canadian-produced documentary program produced by Cineflix. The early program Astral Media also participated in the production. Its original English version it is broadcast on National Geographic Channel and Discovery Channel around the world. It is broadcast in French on Canal D in Quebec, Canada. The Chinese version has been copyrighted by multiple TV stations. This program mainly introduces the major modern aviation accidents that occurred after the invention of the black box in the 1970s. Air Disaster will use a simulated performance to recreate the entire incident from the perspective of passengers, pilots, and other people, from the period before the accident to the accident, subsequent aftermath, and investigation. The film will be interspersed with interviews with passengers and pilots, if any survivors are willing to be interviewed, or air traffic control recordings, if there are recordings of the accident and the relevant units allow it to be released, and interviews with air accident investigators will also be included. Personnel, witnesses, family members of relevant personnel, etc. The sources are mainly accident investigation reports and related news reports. If the accident investigation report cannot be obtained because the investigating unit does not make the report public, relevant experts will be consulted to piece together the full picture. At the same time, in order to let the audience understand the causes of relevant accidents, a brief introduction to relevant aviation knowledge will be added to the film. Air Catastrophe will pay attention to the appearance of the aircraft, airline painting, flight attendant uniforms, airports, etc., but it is not 100% exactly the same as that of the time. There are occasional inconsistencies, such as mixed use of aircraft cockpits, aircraft mixed appearance, incorrect use of aircraft paint, wide-body aircraft accidents using narrow-body aircraft cabins, etc. In addition, early episodes have many reused clips, such as runway scenes in heavy rain. When simulating a performance, an actor who looks similar to the person involved will be found to play the role. 12th. Flashback. Source: ChatGPT. Post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, is a psychological traumatic reaction caused by experiencing a shocking, terrifying or painful event. Flashbacks, which are intense, sudden, uncontrolled recollections of a traumatic event, are a common symptom in individuals with PTSD. These flashbacks can come in many forms, including psychological flashback, a sudden, intense, vivid recollection of a traumatic event that occurs while the individual is awake. This may include feeling as though you are reliving the traumatic event, intense emotional reactions, or physical sensations. Dreams or nightmares. During sleep, an individual may dream about traumatic events, which may cause fear or anxiety when the patient wakes up. Sensory flashbacks. Certain stimuli, such as sounds, smells, sights, etc., may trigger memories of the traumatic event, making the patient feel as if they are in the traumatic event again. Flashbacks. An individual may frequently recall traumatic events in an attempt to understand or process the experience. These flashbacks not only cause physical and psychological pain, but may also affect an individual's daily life, work, and relationships. Treatment methods for PTSD include psychotherapy, such as cognitive behavioral therapy, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing therapy, etc., and medication, such as antidepressants or anti-anxiety drugs, as well as other supportive measures. Early diagnosis and treatment are key to reducing PTSD symptoms. Source: Medical Encyclopedia. Mild mental trauma may manifest as depression, sadness, and tears, decreased motivation for life, unwillingness to interact with others, lack of interest in life, etc. This situation is very common in our lives, and even strictly speaking, everyone will experience it many times in their life. This situation can usually be cured by self-regulation through comfort and support from relatives and friends. After a period of adjustment, it can heal itself without the need for professional treatment. However, if the above situation persists for more than 3 months, you should consider seeking professional help. Treatment can be through medication, but it can also be through non-drug counseling or psychotherapy. Moderate mental trauma may manifest as long-term depression, pessimism, social isolation, or severe sleep disorders, anxiety, fear, cowardice, and even suicidal tendencies. At this time, it is often misdiagnosed as depression, neurasthenia, anxiety, or phobia. After taking antidepressants and anti-anxiety drugs, the results were not good. Therefore, special trauma-specific treatments are needed to be effective. Treatment mainly relies on non-drug psychotherapy, and drug treatment can only play a supporting role. Severe mental trauma is also known as PTSD. In addition to the above symptoms, it also has typical symptoms, such as memories or images of the harmful event that constantly appear in dreams, or that continue to replay in the mind even in the waking state. Therefore, the victim is often in panic and pain, as if the traumatic event happened just now. This phenomenon is called a flashback. In addition, many normal scenes in life may become trigger points that induce traumatic memories, awakening memories, and experiences of traumatic events, resulting in strong emotional and physiological reactions. More serious trauma, especially childhood trauma, may also cause severe personality distortion and psychological abnormality. For this kind of situation, it must be cured or improved through systematic and strict psychological trauma treatment. Symptoms include low mood, depression, sadness, and tears, decreased motivation in life, unwillingness to interact with others, lack of interest in life, etc. Conclusion. I feel that sometimes experience and technology are really more important than equipment. Coming soon. Flashback.